Hello, my friends. I'm Dr. Steve Nugent. In the next few minutes, I'm going to be talking with you about the nutrition of aging. Aging doesn't start at the age of 40 or 60. It starts much earlier than that. You'll be surprised with what I have to say on the beginning of aging. And it's also important to note that you change as you age. So what worked for you 20 years ago may not work for you very well today. Many people think about dietary supplements as, well, medicines, as something you do when you have a symptom. And you do it, of course, until the symptom goes away. Well, supplements are not medicines. That's not the way they're supposed to be used. Other people think that, well, you use supplements only at certain times of the year. No. That's also incorrect. And then, of course, there are many people who think, well, I'm only going to take supplements and do the right thing for my health for about a month prior to swimsuit season, so I look really good at the beach. No, that's not the right attitude either, I'm afraid. It's a much bigger picture. You know, it's interesting to me, there was a survey in New Zealand that I read a few years back, and this survey said that 97% of New Zealanders believe themselves to be healthy. That's great. But there was another question further down the survey, and the question said, do you take pharmaceutical drugs? 65% of the people surveyed, the people who said they were healthy, said that they took pharmaceutical drugs. Now, folks, do you take drugs if you're healthy? Of course not. What they were really doing is they were thinking about the fact that their symptoms were under control by the pharmaceutical drug. And since they had no symptoms, well, they were well. I don't want you to think about supplements that way, folks. I want you to think about supplements as the nutrition your body requires to be healthy every day, your entire life. And hopefully you'll learn some pretty important things about that in the next few minutes. So then, here are some quick thoughts before we get into the real meat of this particular topic today. Most of our daily requirements in the majority of dietary supplements, or let me say it this way, most of your daily requirements for nutrition increase with age. And you're going to be surprised with some of those increases, how dramatic, in fact, dramatic isn't even a strong enough word, how astounding some of these increases are. Most people do not get enough antioxidant from diet alone. Most people do not get enough vitamins from diet alone. Most people do not get enough minerals from diet alone. And metabolism and hormone balances reduce as we age. There's lots of consequences with that. And in our stressful world, we have an increasing need for nutrients above and beyond what we used to think about during the 20th century. Things have changed. Now, here's something that's going to surprise you. You probably never thought about this, but when do you start aging? Well, you actually start aging at the moment of conception. That's right. You are growing older with each moment while you're in your mother's womb. You are already aging. Now, the peak of that aging is reached around the age of 28. It can vary a little bit from one person to another. It could be 29, could be 30, but the average is 28 years of age. By the age of 40, it starts to become noticeable to most that they are starting to get older. We know, based on the very first study done by any government agency on planet Earth, which was done back in 1995 and then repeated numerous times up through 2012, that human beings are not getting enough antioxidants from fruits and vegetables from diet alone. And in fact, the 2012 recommendation was 13 servings of fresh fruits and vegetables per day. Folks, that's unreasonable. Even if you're a vegan, you're probably not going to eat that many fruits and vegetables a day. So it was at that time that the US Department of Agriculture, the first agency in the world to do a study of this type, they just quit doing the studies because every time they did it, the levels required to meet our oxidative stress levels, which were also increasing every year and have continued to increase every year since 1995, there was just no point doing the test anymore because nobody was going to meet these standards. There was an article published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, one of the top journals in the United States, and I would argue the world. And in this, there were scientists, medical doctors, who drew the blood of individuals to test them for vitamins. And they found that the majority of people were not getting sufficient vitamin from diet alone. And they said that all adults should be taking vitamin supplements every day, all their lives. Well, in the United States, there have been many surveys done, and I use the US simply because there are better statistics available and more reliable statistics available in the US than really in any other country in the world. But human beings are human beings. So I'll give you a couple of US stats. Approximately 75% of Americans take dietary supplements. Now, that's on top of their diet. The United States has been referred to many times as the breadbasket of the world, where food is so abundant that, well, there's just no reason to be short of food. So we've got the modern diet, abundant food, 75% of the population are taking supplements. But guess what? 90% of Americans are deficient in at least one nutrient, and more than 70% are deficient in a variety of nutrients. Well, that says something about the modern diet, doesn't it? Well, without essential minerals and vitamins to make your body do what it needs to do, you cannot maintain good health. It's not possible. So that means everybody should, as the doctors in that study said, everybody should be taking a daily vitamin mineral supplement. There's no question. In our inventory, that would mean Phytomatrix or Nutriveris. Now, there are certain vitamins and minerals which are catalytic to other nutrients that work either catalytically or synergistically, and that includes, by the way, glycans, or what are commercially known as glyconutrients. So don't expect your ambrotose to function correctly if you're missing key vitamins or minerals. What about brain function, energy, your glandular function or endocrine function, production of enzymes, antioxidant protection, digestion, mood, memory, protein metabolism, blood sugar balance, liver health, kidney health, etc. These are all things that require basic vitamin mineral support. Wow. And it should be every day for the rest of your life. As we age, we find that our metabolism slows down, and the rate at which we break down food decreases by about 10% each decade after the age of 20. That means if you're not digesting your food correctly, this is going to result in a wide variety of problems, but just top three: less energy, less stamina, and more body fat. Well, let's talk about the endocrine system or glandular system. And first, we'll talk about women, but we're going to talk about men and women here. Men and women alike can be affected by imbalances in insulin, steroids, growth hormones, and adrenaline. Women may experience imbalances in estrogen and progesterone levels because they are estrogen primary. And men, of course, may experience imbalances in testosterone level because men are testosterone primary. So what does endocrine support do? What do those hormones produced by your endocrine glands do? Well, first of all, they support your metabolism. That results in energy, that supports your cognitive thought process, that helps you keep your body trim and not put on too much excess body fat, and the list goes on. Growth and development, sexual function, and reproduction. So fertility, heart rate, blood pressure, appetite, sleeping, and waking cycles are all part of the jobs that the endocrine system has to address. Now, as I mentioned before, our peak of youthful health is around the age of 28. By the age of 30, a woman begins to experience metabolism slowdown. Women begin to see decreases in fertility starting around the age of 30. Hormone production begins to decline. By the age of 40, libido is declining in women significantly. Mood swings happen. Muscle loss is beginning. I'm going to come back to muscle loss because this is really, really important and people don't give it enough time and attention. And of course, hormones have declined nearly to the deficiency level by the age of 40 in women. But once you've passed the age of 50, now menopause, low energy and fatigue, more weight gain, memory loss, and insomnia. Hormones are now at deficient levels when you've passed the age of 50. And yes, there will be some variations. Somebody will be 55 and somebody will be 51, but past the age of 50. Now for men, by the age of 30, muscle loss has already peaked. In fact, it probably peaked around the age of 28 and has begun a very slow decline. But by the age of 30, men start to experience problems with weight gain. And there are subtle changes in how they look and feel. And hormones are beginning to decline. By the age of 40, now men are having problem with their libidos, and function is declining as well. Hormones declining to near deficient levels in a man's fourth decade of life, and sleep is becoming a problem. Starting to lose strength as muscle is in slow but continuous decline. Again, I'm going to spend a few moments on that in a few minutes about muscle decline because it's a very big problem, bigger than you know. You'll have some men who in their 40s will say, I don't feel quite as strong as I did when I was in my 20s. Well, there's a reason for that. There's more than one reason for that. It's real. What about when men pass the age of 50? Well, that's when they go into what's called andropause, and that basically means male menopause. So men also, as their hormone levels have now become deficient, testosterone has dropped now, usually below normal levels, and sometimes dramatically for some men, they will experience low energy, weight gain, memory loss, problems with cognitive function, strength, and the list goes on. They don't just feel very much like they did as young men anymore. All right, so looking at where we're at right now, this means we're going to support our bodies every day, the rest of our lives, with Phytomatrix. And of course, we'll use our endocrine support product called Plus. Plus works. Plus is for men and women. Now, for women, it's supporting things like reproductive health and breast health and that sort of thing. For men, it's primarily supporting prostate health, but it is supporting the other endocrine glands as well. Here's something that gets talked about, but this is going to shock you when you hear these numbers. We know, based on physiological data, that bone loss with aging is really dramatic. Now, in women, the rate is between 3 to 4% per year per decade at the age of 50. Now, by the time a woman has reached 60, she may be declining by as much as 25% per decade. Now, this is why the bones will reach this point where they become not only weak, but even brittle and will break easily. And of course, this happens as we age. Now, men also experience bone loss, by the way, but they experience it at a much slower rate than women. And you ladies will say, that's not fair. Well, Listen, 3 to 4% every 10 years up to the age of 50, and then 25% per decade after the age of 60. This is pretty serious stuff. If you're confused by these percentages, I want you to keep life expectancies in mind. In North America, U.S. males are expected to live to be 76.1 on average, and females 81.1. In Canada, it's 80 for males and 84.4 for females. In Mexico, it's 73.1 for males and 78.9 for females. And by the way, there's a myth around calcium, and I don't have time in this presentation to talk about that, but there's a significant myth here. And that is women simply need to take more calcium and that'll make their bones strong. And I'm sorry, that's simply not true. It is true that strong bones need calcium. Absolutely no question. And it is true that bones are made primarily of calcium. Absolutely no question. However, in order for you to utilize calcium, to actually break it down so it becomes bioavailable and it becomes useful to your bones, and so that it can actually stay in your bones, calcium is not the answer. The answer are other cofactors such as magnesium and vitamin D. In fact, the latest studies are showing that most people in the modern diet are actually eating more calcium than they need every day, even before we talk about a dietary supplement. And if you get too much calcium, you will calcify your tissues, create kidney stones. You can calcify your arteries and contribute to serious heart problems. And the list goes on. So just loading calcium is not smart. In fact, it's a lot smarter to be loading magnesium and vitamin D, because chances are you're already eating more calcium every day than you actually require. But if you don't have enough vitamin D and magnesium, that calcium is going to do negative things to your body, not positive things. Once again, if you're confused by these percentages, I want you to remember the life expectancy numbers. Let's talk about muscle loss very quickly. Well, this is, as I say, much more serious than you know. Muscle loss is normal and natural, and it occurs at about 3 to 8% per decade after the age of 30. And this rate of decline is even higher after the age of 60. Now, this rate, when it begins with women, women will feel the decline probably more than men, because women have less muscle mass naturally than men to begin with. But with men, at some point, the men are going to say how they just don't feel strong anymore. Some men will even say things like, well, I don't feel like a man anymore. I just don't feel that sort of strength and robustness that I used to have. And much of this is about endocrine function, testosterone, and of course, muscle mass. That muscle mass is breaking down every single day, starting around the age of 30. Men should eat 56 grams of protein minimum daily, and women 46 grams of protein minimum daily. Now understand what I'm saying here. Minimum daily to maintain muscle mass. In other words, 56 grams for men and 46 grams for women to keep them from losing muscle mass. Now that's not additional protein to help you gain muscle mass. That's to keep you from losing muscle mass. Now here's another key, and I always get a kick out of this. We've had so many associates who, when they started with Manna Shake, and we talked about body composition and building muscle mass, and they would come to me and say, you know, my muscles aren't growing. Well, it's not magic, folks. I wish it was. I wish that I could invent that magic pill or powder for you, but nobody's figured that out yet. So you have to have protein taken into your body in sufficient quantities to make a difference. And then there has to be a signal to the muscle that says, I need protein, send me protein now. That signal is generated by physical activity. That doesn't mean you have to kill yourself in the gym. You don't have to become Mr. or Ms. Universe. None of that stuff. But you need to be physically active. It's not magic. And once again, let me go back to these numbers again. 56 grams a day for men, 46 for women. These are averages. If a woman is naturally larger, she's going to need more. If a man is naturally larger than the average, they're going to need more. So if you're bigger naturally, this means your numbers need to go up even higher. So 56 grams for a man is not enough to help him build muscle. That's enough to help him retain muscle. Still, physical activity is required or muscle wasting will still occur because there needs to be a signal to the muscle, from the muscle to the brain, I should say, from the muscle to the brain that says, send me protein now. All right, so physical activity. And again, it doesn't have to be killing yourself in the gym. You just need to be physically active. In addition to that, you'll want to take protein supplements. Now, you'll choose whatever supplement you wish. Manashake has 9 grams of protein. Osoline has 10 grams of protein per 12 gram serving. The two of them combined, well, you're up to 19, and that's excellent, but that's still not enough to meet the minimum. So you have to make sure that your diet is properly balanced with protein. On muscle retention, we're going to say Manashake, Osoline, Phytomatrix, and Plus. Why? You need the vitamin and mineral catalytic actions, and you also need Plus to support your endocrine system. All right, let's talk a little bit about oxidative stress. Well, the best way to think about oxidative stress is rust. R-U-S-T, rust. Oxidative stress on metal is called rust. Now, you're not made of metal and you don't exactly rust, but it's a pretty similar activity. In fact, if you were to look at healthy cells that are being attacked by what are calling free radical molecules, which are causing free radical oxidative stress, it looks very much like these molecules are being eaten away by these free radicals. Now understand, it is part of the normal daily process for you to create oxidative free radicals. In fact, breathing creates oxidative free radicals. However, if your diet is providing you everything you need, and I've already established it's unlikely that it is, but let's say in the old days, the days of our ancestors, where their diets were giving them what they needed for the stresses that they were experiencing, which is not the case today for most of us, then breathing didn't cause a problem because they got enough of the antioxidants that they needed from vegetables and fruit. Well, things are different now. We're in the 21st century. Things have changed a lot. According to scientists, as of the year 2004, there were more than 75,000 synthetic chemicals that had been added to Earth's environment, the air, the water, the soil, that had never existed on planet Earth before the year 1930, never existed. These are synthetic chemicals that science created. You can't avoid exposure to these. And there are some scientists now who tell us that based on their studies, they have found that when two synthetic compounds combine in a water source, could be a pond, a puddle, a lake, an ocean, they form new compounds that nobody ever thought about, new compounds that no one ever intended to have. So there's probably no way of knowing how many of these potentially dangerous synthetics are all over the planet right now. There's just no way to know. We do know from scientific study that pesticides have been found in the snow, the air, the ice, the water of the North Pole. And pesticides have been found in the fatty tissue of penguins at the South Pole. And pesticides have been found in fish tested in every waterway thus far tested. And In all human test groups thus far, every human has had various toxins, chemical toxins in their blood at various levels on every single test, no exceptions. You cannot avoid exposure to these toxins. You can't do it. I don't care where you live. There are even warnings posted by the United States Department of Agriculture and by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration about certain fish you probably shouldn't eat at all anymore because of their toxic exposure. Certain fish you should limit the amount of. Some fish that pregnant women should never eat. So life in the 21st century is different, folks. This is not the 20th century. We have to get a grip on this. And we all need to be looking after our health every day for the rest of our lives. Not just take some nutrients until we feel better and then quit. This is every day for the rest of your lives. It's part of your grocery budget. That's the way to look at it. So for oxidative stress, the best antioxidant on planet Earth, as validated by human serum ORAC testing, is called Ambertose AO. It's exclusive to Manitech. It's the only place you can get it. All of the other antioxidant products in the world, well, they can't meet our standard. And they all make great claims and great marketing. And I always say to them, hey, all you have to do is prove it to me. I'm a scientist. I accept scientific evidence. Show me the science. And of course, they never do. They just come back with clever slogans, beautiful websites, great marketing. Folks, the best antioxidant product on planet Earth, as proven by 3 human serum ORAC studies, those are blood studies, is Manitech's Ambertose AO. In addition to that, catalyst for other factors that help to support your system against oxidative stress. Now, some of you are saying, why hasn't he talked about Ambertose yet? Well, I'm about to do that. It's a given for me, my friends. It's a given for me that everybody takes Ambertose every day. You don't have to ask me, should I take Ambertose? The answer is yes. And you might say, well, I have concus of the boncus. Should I take Ambertose? Yes. Well, I have non-concus of the boncus. Should I take Ambertose? Yes. If you're breathing, take Ambertose. By the way, concus of the boncus is not a disease. I made that up. If you're breathing, take Ambertose. That's how easy it is, all right? Why? Because all functions of your body depend on cellular communication. You'll see a picture of a cell where there are a bunch of sort of squiggly things that are coming up out of the surface of the cell. Those things are called cell surface receptor sites. Now, on each of these cell surface receptor sites, you'll see in the picture a number of beads. Each of these beads represents something called a glycoprotein. A glycoprotein is a particular glycan, or what are commercially called glyconutrients, a specific glycan, which has deliberately bonded to a specific protein amino acid. Then that combination, now called a glycoprotein, has to bond to a specific predetermined site. There are no accidents here. And the reason this is done is because your body can't function without cellular communication. That is foundational. We also know that the modern diet is not providing the 8 necessary glycans for cellular communication for everyone all the time. In fact, the scientific data indicates that 2 of the 8 are being provided to virtually almost everyone on the planet all the time. But the other 6, well, it varies. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Folks, you can't take a chance with that. So we know that on the basics of immune function, well, let me see, you're going to need vitamin C, okay? Now that's only part of it. You're going to need zinc. You're going to need a number of other things as well. But let's just say vitamin C. When you consume a food that contains vitamin C, or a supplement for that matter, but if you consume a food that contains vitamin C, you're going to have a communication that tells your digestive system which enzyme to use to break down the food and release the vitamin C from the food. You're going to need a communication that tells the system how to transport the vitamin C that has now been freed, that's been released, and where to transport it to. That's another communication. You're going to need a communication where the immune system can see what's going on in your body. Has something entered your body that's hostile, that doesn't belong there? You're going to need a communication that tells your immune system what kind of immune cells to use to respond to this new threat, and where the threat is and what the threat looks like. These are all communications. So your immune system can't function without cellular communication. But let's look at what we know in terms of ambrotose. Now, I've never, ever been disappointed by ambrotose. We've never had a single disappointing study with ambrotose because of cellular communication, because that's what it does. And we've proven that in scientific study. Now, as a result of that, when we've tested for cognition or brain function, it's improved. We test for memory, it improves. We test for concentration, it improves. We test for intentiveness or mood or irritability, we see improvements. The immune system, of course. Even digestive function, because these glycans are prebiotics. Prebiotics are the food that probiotics need to eat in order to grow and multiply and be healthy and protect you. So we know all of that from scientific study. So for everybody, you don't have to ask me if you should take ambrotose. Everybody takes ambrotose. That's not the question. And for the others, what should we be doing when we're talking about a minimum of lifetime support? Not support until you feel better. It's a minimum. And folks, put it in your grocery budget. We start with Phytomatrix Plus and ambrotose AO. And of course, ambrotose, everybody, all the time, no question, everybody. So with this in mind, I think all of you now should have a really firm grip on this. Dietary supplements are not medicines. They're not meant to be taken until your symptoms go away. They're not meant to be taken when it's convenient. And they need to be taken to support your health as you age, because you and your health are the most important thing you have. But the point to reinforce here is, as you age, you change. As you change, your nutritional needs change. Keep up with the changes. But make sure that you're taking the right nutrition to support your body for the optimal state of wellness. These are the products. And I appreciate the time that you've taken to watch this presentation.